Tim Davie resigned from the BBC on the basis that it was about to go bust. Now, since 2020, a total of 2.4 million people have cancelled their licence fee at £174.50 each. That figure was expected to double to 5 million. I'm going to, in this video, tell you about the way that the BBC has lied consistently, about the way it has been taken over by the political left, about the way that it has let us down, but also about the fact that we own it and we have a right to take it back. I'm not somebody who believes the BBC should be destroyed. I believe that it is our property, it's our birthright, and it's something that when reformed can actually be very, very good. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, please donate to the Patriot Fund. We're supporting right-wing causes right across the country. Tim Davie has admitted it. All of the bias in the world was not the reason that he resigned, not the reason the head of news resigned. Remember about Abdullah, the Gazan boy who turned out to be the son of a Hamas leader. Remember when Hamas launched a missile at Israel and the BBC blamed the Israelis for firing it and said that there had been, 500 deaths. Now I will tell you, I've been in war zones before today, and there's a great phrase in English common law, which is this: you knew or ought to have known. Let me tell you, if 20 minutes after a missile has landed, somebody tells you that 500 people were killed, you knew or ought to have known, number one, that the round figure in of itself was dodgy. Number two, not to believe Hamas, because they are the information ministry in Gaza. For better or worse, they're the government. And number three, I guarantee you, having been in the war zone, when a missile lands, you will never find out who was killed by it, because, you know, what is done to these people when a missile lands is not, they don't fall down dead like they do in the movies. It's much more serious than that. So the BBC knew that they had lied about this, and it was a really important issue. When they were told that people would now riot as a result of the false claims on the BBC, Jeremy Bowen said, well, that's life. Israel's done lots of bad things. And maybe that's true, but we need our national broadcaster to be entirely honest. This Donald Trump thing is different. The reason is that Donald Trump has decided to sue media organisations that lie about him. Now, that is his perfect right. And I think in the High Court of England, he would win about the BBC. This claim that he deliberately attempted to cause an insurrection in the capital. I will tell you one thing about what happened in the capital. Now, to be fair, Simon Brodkin, do you remember him, Lee Nelson? Simon Brodkin threw a load of golf balls at Donald Trump at Turnberry in Scotland. And he said, shh, the big secret about the US Secret Service is they're not very good. But assuming that is untrue and Brodkin just got lucky, look, the claim on the Capitol was, first of all, that there was a Trump march, which he encouraged because he believed that the election had been rigged. I'll come back to the rigged election in a moment because I think it is important. But he did not encourage an insurrection in the Capitol. He did not encourage people to go inside the Capitol building. But one would expect, on the basis of programmes that you watch like The West Wing and others, you would expect the Capitol to be easily protected by US Secret Service, plus the National Guard, plus the Capitol Police. But in fact, a group of completely unarmed protesters were able to storm the Capitol. You know, if they had fought their way in with Armalite assault rifles, I would believe that it was a coup d'etat or an insurrection. But actually, all they did was walked in with buffalo hats that looked completely ludicrous. It is a fact that Donald Trump did not cause an insurrection. And the BBC deliberately edited that footage. And Donald Trump is suing them because that is the best way to cause trouble. But Tim Davie didn't resign over that. He resigned because of the number of you that were going to cancel your licence fee. And by the way, let me just make this point about the election in the United States of America. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Ofcom, all of them agreed on one thing, that it was not allowed, it was a breach of the terms and conditions, to say that there was, to suggest that there were any election irregularities in the presidential election where Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden. Let me tell you, as somebody who's been to plenty of elections, there are always electoral irregularities. The question wasn't whether there had been irregularities. The question was whether those irregularities affected the result, right? Now, let me tell you, why are there queues at ballot boxes? The reason there are queues at ballot boxes is because in most parts of the country, there is one ballot box per county. So that means that me in Windsor, I would have to drive to Reading to get to my ballot box. And also, they're being run by people who are political appointments. It is vital within the American system that you have the right to legally challenge any decision made by the government. Their concept of judicial review is much bigger than ours is. And therefore, whether I accept that whether I accept Donald Trump's contention that the election was rigged or not, his right to challenge the result in individual areas is sacrosanct to his democracy and something that absolutely must happen. Secondly, the claim by social media and others that there was absolutely no examples of electoral fraud at all is just bananas. It's ridiculous. I mean, you will always see people do things like attempt to put in more postal ballots in Britain than they're entitled to. In Pendle, there is 1, 2 up, 2 down that has 70 people living in it. The Electoral Commission has refused to investigate that in the UK. I can't say whether these 70 people are all fakes, but I certainly believe the possibility that they're genuine is less likely than them being fake. And so when this thing comes up about the insurrection, remember, it was legitimate for Donald Trump's supporters to protest because they were being told that they weren't allowed to challenge the result in a wholly legitimate way through the courts. And it was then for the courts to decide. And by the way, some courts were sympathetic to the view. No court, by the way, ruled that it changed the result. But it wasn't true to say that the courts accepted that there were no case of electoral fraud at all. The reason they didn't do that is because they're not stupid. But back to the BBC. The BBC have been desperate to claim that Donald Trump is a dictator who will remain in the White House forever. Look at the debate that they had about the about the White House ballroom. Now, let me tell you one thing. The White House was designed by a very, very lovely architect, and it was designed to be the full size of an executive residence. George Washington cancelled those designs. And instead, we have the house that we see today. 17 White Houses would fit inside Buckingham Palace, right? And by the way, Buckingham Palace is only the office of the head of state of Britain, not the office of the head of government and the head of state, whereas the White House is both in the United States of America. It has been extended with the East Wing and the West Wing, but it has not been extended sufficiently where you can have a state banquet in it. So the fact that he has built a ballroom in order to have a state banquet on the state visit makes it exactly the same as every presidential palace in the world. And the reason I raise the point about that is because the BBC literally broadcast a news article in which it was claimed that his ballroom was evidence that he was not going to leave office when his term limit was up. Now, remember something. They've been running this for years, the BBC, haven't they? He attempted a coup d'etat to stay in power. No, he let Biden in and supported the protest. Oh, the ballroom is proof that he's a fascist and he wants to take power. The reality is they are desperate for him to be similar to Adolf Hitler, but he just isn't. They want him to, be able to claim that he is going to maintain power, he's going to keep office even after the election. They want to say that he will abolish the US presidential election. It's garbage. The claim that he will abolish the election, the claim he has attempted to abolish the election is merely political. Because you know, and I know, that in the fullness of time, it will be shown that Donald Trump will leave office properly, as it was shown last time. That argument on the Capitol, by the way, was wholly legitimate and had happened before. Remember when Al Gore had to overrule an attempt by the Senate to set aside the election result where George Bush beat him. And there was a motion in the Senate for him to ignore it. Mike Pence had to do the same thing, although Mike Pence wasn't on. Was Mike Pence on the ticket? I can't remember. But the reality is it falls to the Vice President as the Speaker of the Senate to rule against himself in these cases, and that is what Mike Pence did, and people were angry about it. But that debate is a legitimate thing. So now let me tell you the truth. The Capitol Police were asleep on the job, at best. US Secret Service had taken their eye off the ball, at best. The National Guard and the governor of DC, well, there isn't a governor, but the mayor of DC, they had taken their eye off the ball as well. People should not have been allowed into the Capitol building that day. The debate should have been allowed to go forward in a proper way. And that debate was that it fell to the Senate to certify the election results, and that Mike Pence wished to rule in favour of those people who wanted the result to stand. Yet there were senators who believed that the results should be challenged and it should move instead to a different system, which I won't bother explaining now, because the election had been inappropriately discharged by certain states. That is a legitimate debate, as is the court case that Donald Trump made in New York, in court. What is illegitimate is when news articles, first of all, attempt to censor people like me who wants to talk openly about that, and every single news outlet in the UK is guilty of that because of Ofcom, our regulator, who were completely wrong on it as well. It is illegitimate to stymie that debate, but then you take a step further. When the BBC edited footage in order to make it look like the US president was a dictator, you put at risk my national security and the national security of the people watching this, and I'll explain why. Because people like Xi Jinping and President Putin of Russia want to be able to say, oh, every country's the same. Look, we've killed our political distance, but so does the UK and so does the United States of America. Oh, we rig our elections, but so do you. And so what happens is kids and young people sit down and they believe that Donald Trump is only as bad as Xi Jinping of China. That is absolutely not true. Our democracies have spread the greatness of this world. We have made what this world is today, for better or worse. And what is destroying the world is the way that we're moving against our values and moving against our traditions. That is what the BBC are guilty of. And that is why Tim Davie was absolutely right. Millions were about to cancel their BBC licence fee, and you can't take 2.5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 million people to court in the way the BBC have tried in the past. By the way, let me say something about the detector vans. Let me tell you a fact. If those detector vans actually existed, if it was possible to work out what you were watching by scanning through the airwaves of your house, it would be a criminal offence to use it. So even if it was something that existed, it doesn't, the vans are empty. But even if that did exist, it wouldn't be legal to scan inside your house, fairly obviously. Tracking your digital communications using an airwave system inside a van is completely mad and illegal. But the BBC have got a major problem, but I did say that at the end of this, I would be positive about the BBC, and I'm going to be positive now. I do think that in a world of cheap media, it is good to have a national broadcaster that has high standards. I think there are elements of BBC News that are genuinely very good, not the elements that say Hamas is described by the British government as a terrorist organisation. No, that's not good. But actually, I do think that that network is worth having. And I do think now we need to think long and hard about how we could have a BBC that was successful. But the number one thing I think you've got to do is break it up into bits, potentially franchising things like Radio 1 in order to ensure that what we don't have is the left-wing monolith that we see at the moment in Media City and Broadcasting House. Please do consider donating to the Patriot Fund below. Until next time, goodbye.